At the will reading, my lawyer played a recording of my daughter-in-law saying, "She's better off dead." The mahogany conference table in my lawyer's office gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, its polished surface reflecting the faces of people who had come to claim pieces of my carefully constructed life. I sat at the head of that table, very much alive despite what some of them clearly wished, watching as greed revealed itself in the slight forward lean of bodies, the nervous fidgeting of hands, the barely concealed anticipation in their eyes. My son Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my gaze, while his wife Sandra sat beside him with the kind of practiced composure that only comes from years of calculated performance. For 68 years I had built something meaningful. My late husband Robert and I had started with nothing but love and determination in our small apartment above the bakery on 5th Street. We worked 18-hour days, saving every penny, investing wisely, building a modest empire that included 3 rental properties, a thriving catering business, and enough savings to ensure our golden years would be comfortable. More importantly, we had built what I thought was a loving family. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Please take a moment to comment below and let me know where you're watching this video from. Your stories and support mean everything to us. If this content helps you or reminds you of someone in your life, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel because we genuinely help families navigate these difficult situations. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in my life. I was in my garden, tending to the roses Robert had planted for our 40th anniversary, when I heard Sandra's voice drifting through the kitchen window. She was on the phone, her tone casual and conversational, completely unaware that I had returned early from my doctor's appointment. The oncologist had delivered news that was both terrifying and clarifying. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, perhaps 6 months if I was lucky. I had driven home in a daze, needing the comfort of familiar surroundings to process this devastating reality. "Honestly, Janet, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Sandra was saying, her voice carrying that particular brand of exasperation reserved for discussing inconvenient family members. "She's becoming such a burden. Michael won't admit it, but I can see the stress is killing him. The constant doctor visits, the medications, the way she hovers over everything we do. Sometimes I think she'd be better off dead. I mean, what kind of life is that anyway? Just waiting around to die?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen among my roses, the pruning shears trembling in my hands, as my daughter-in-law continued her conversation. "The worst part is how she clings to control of everything. The house, the business, even the grocery shopping. She acts like we're children who can't be trusted with anything important. If she would just let go, we could all move on with our lives. But no, she has to micromanage everything from her deathbed." I listened as she actually laughed, at whatever response her friend gave. "I know it sounds terrible, but I keep thinking about how much easier things would be. No more scheduling our lives around her needs, no more pretending to care about her endless stories about the good old days. And frankly, the inheritance would certainly help with the kids' college funds. Michael feels guilty even thinking about it, but I'm more practical. Sometimes the kindest thing is just accepting reality." Standing there in my garden, surrounded by the beauty Robert and I had cultivated together, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The woman who had raised Michael, who had welcomed Sandra into our family with open arms, who had babysit their children countless weekends, who had helped with down payments and emergencies and celebrations. That woman was being dismissed as an inconvenient obstacle to their happiness. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. I quietly made my way to my study and activated the voice recorder on my phone, a habit I had developed during business meetings. Then I returned to the kitchen and asked Sandra about her phone call, feigning casual interest. The lies came so easily to her. "Oh, just chatting with Janet about her mother-in-law troubles. You know how it is with aging parents." She smiled that practiced smile that I now recognized as completely hollow. "I was just telling her how grateful I am that you're so independent and healthy. We're so lucky you don't need constant care like some elderly people do." The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I began paying attention to conversations, attitudes, and behaviors I had previously overlooked or excused. I heard Sandra complaining to neighbors about the burden of caring for an aging mother-in-law, conveniently omitting that I had been managing my own affairs quite independently. I overheard Michael agreeing with her assessment that I was getting difficult, and maybe losing it a bit, when I questioned some of their financial decisions regarding the family business. They were constructing a narrative that painted me as a declining burden rather than the competent woman who had built everything they stood to inherit. What devastated me most was discovering how they had been undermining my relationships with my grandchildren. 8-year-old Emma had stopped calling me Grandma Rose and started referring to me as Dad's mom, in that distant way children use when they've been coached to create emotional distance. 12-year-old James, who used to spend hours listening to my stories about building the business with his grandfather, now seemed fidgety and uncomfortable during our visits, as if he had been taught to see our time together as an obligation rather than a joy. I made the decision to accelerate my estate planning, but not in the way they expected. I scheduled an appointment with my lawyer, Harold Peterson, who had been handling my legal affairs for 20 years. Harold was a man of exceptional discretion and professional integrity, someone who understood that families often revealed their true nature when money was involved. I played him the recording of Sandra's phone conversation and watched his expression shift from surprise to disgust to professional determination. "Mrs. Williams," he said carefully, "this recording certainly provides insight into your daughter-in-law's character, but I need to ask, what do you want to do with this information?" I had spent weeks considering that exact question. The cancer was progressing faster than the doctors had initially predicted. I was facing my own mortality with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating. I could continue pretending that Sandra's words were meaningless, or I could acknowledge the truth about how my family viewed me and act accordingly. "I want to change my will," I told him. "I want to ensure that my legacy goes to people who actually value what Robert and I built together, not people who see my death as a convenient solution to their problems." We spent the next 3 hours restructuring my entire estate plan. The house would go to my sister Margaret, who had always appreciated its history and significance. The business would be sold, with proceeds split between several local charities that supported elderly care and small business development. Michael would receive a modest inheritance, enough to acknowledge our relationship but not enough to reward his complicity in Sandra's cruelty. The months that followed were perhaps the most enlightening of my life. As my health declined and my need for actual support increased, I watched my family's true priorities reveal themselves with stunning clarity. Sandra's visits became perfunctory performances, marked by impatient sighs and barely concealed irritation when I needed help with basic tasks. Michael, caught between loyalty to his wife and guilt about his mother, chose the path of least resistance by simply avoiding me whenever possible. Meanwhile, I discovered genuine care and companionship in unexpected places. My neighbor Mrs. Chan, who barely spoke English but communicated perfectly through kind gestures and gentle presence. The young nurse, Patricia, who came twice a week and treated me with the dignity and respect that my own family couldn't manage. My sister Margaret, who drove 3 hours each way every weekend to spend time with me, bringing fresh flowers and homemade soup and the gift of treating me like a person rather than a problem to be solved. The final blow came during what would be my last hospitalization. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, tethered to life by machines and medications, when I heard Sandra's voice in the hallway outside my room. She was talking to someone, probably Michael, in the kind of hushed tone people use in hospitals. "The doctor said it could be any day now. I know it's awful to say, but I almost hope it happens soon. This limbo is exhausting for everyone. The kids are traumatized by seeing her like this. And honestly, she's not really living anymore anyway." Even in my weakened state, the casualness of her dismissal hit me like a physical blow. I was a person, a woman with decades of experiences and relationships and contributions to the world, and to her I was just an inconvenient delay in accessing my assets. That night, I called Harold from my hospital bed and made one final addition to my will. The recording would be played at the will reading, ensuring that everyone present would understand exactly why my decisions had been made. I survived that hospitalization, living another 6 weeks in hospice care at Margaret's house. Those final weeks were filled with more genuine love and connection than I had experienced in years. Margaret read to me from books we had loved as children. Patricia continued visiting even though I was no longer officially her patient, bringing her guitar and playing soft songs that helped ease my anxiety. Mrs. Chun appeared daily with containers of soup and the kind of wordless comfort that transcended language barriers. When I finally passed, it was peacefully, surrounded by people who saw me as someone worth loving rather than someone in the way. Margaret held my hand, Patricia hummed a gentle melody, and Mrs. Chun sat quietly in the corner, her presence a testament to the power of simple human kindness. I had found my way back to being Rose Williams, not just Michael's mother or Sandra's burden, but a complete person worthy of respect and genuine affection. The will reading took place exactly as I had envisioned it. Harold had arranged the meeting in the conference room where I had conducted business for decades, the same mahogany table where Robert and I had signed contracts and planned our future together. Michael and Sandra arrived early, Sandra dressed in appropriately somber colors but unable to hide the anticipation in her eyes. My sister Margaret sat quietly, still grieving but prepared for what was to come. A few cousins and family friends rounded out the gathering, people who had genuine affection for me and curiosity about my final wishes. Harold began with the standard legal formalities, explaining the process and ensuring everyone understood their rights and responsibilities. Then he reached the crucial moment. "Before I proceed with the specific bequests," he said, his voice carrying the weight of professional authority, "Rose Williams left specific instructions that a recording be played for all present. She felt it was important for you to understand the reasoning behind her final decisions." The silence in the room was absolute as Harold activated the audio system. Sandra's voice filled the space with crystal clarity, her casual cruelty preserved for posterity. "Honestly, Janet, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. She's becoming such a burden. Sometimes I think she'd be better off dead. I mean, what kind of life is that anyway? Just waiting around to die?" I wish I could have seen Sandra's face as her own words condemned her. The recording continued for several minutes, each casual dismissal of my worth as a human being landing with devastating impact in that silent room. When it finally ended, the silence stretched on, heavy with shock and recognition of the truth that had been hidden beneath polite family dynamics. Michael's face had gone ashen, his hands trembling as the full weight of what his wife had said, and what his silence had enabled, settled upon him. Sandra's carefully constructed composure cracked completely, her mouth opening and closing without sound as she struggled to find words that could somehow explain away the inexcusable. Harold resumed reading the will with professional detachment. The house to Margaret, the business to be liquidated for charitable purposes. Michael's modest inheritance, accompanied by a note expressing my love for him but my disappointment in his choices. Sandra's name was mentioned only once, specifically excluded from any inheritance and barred from making any claims against the estate. The aftermath was exactly what I had anticipated. Sandra's shock transformed into rage, then into desperate attempts at justification. "She was recording private conversations," she shouted. "This isn't legal. She was manipulating all of us." But Harold had anticipated every objection, every legal challenge. The recording had been made in my own home, perfectly legal. The will had been prepared months before my death, clearly demonstrating my mental competence and deliberate intentions. Michael sat in stunned silence, finally confronting the reality of what his passive complicity had cost him. He had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity, and now faced the consequences of that choice. His modest inheritance would be barely enough to cover his children's immediate needs, nothing like the substantial legacy he had expected to receive. In death, I had finally found my voice and my power. The recording served not just as evidence of Sandra's cruelty, but as a testament to my own worth and dignity. I had refused to be dismissed, diminished, or defined by other people's convenience. My legacy became not just financial assets distributed to deserving recipients, but a powerful statement about the importance of treating elderly family members with respect and genuine love. The charitable organizations that benefited from the sale of my business used the funds to establish programs supporting elderly care and family counseling, ensuring that other families might avoid the painful dynamics that had torn mine apart. The house that Robert and I had filled with love became a sanctuary where Margaret could heal from her own grief while preserving the memories and values we had shared. Most importantly, the truth had been revealed. No more polite pretenses, no more hidden resentments, no more casual dismissals of an inconvenient elderly relative. Sandra's true character had been exposed for everyone to see, and the consequences of treating family members as burdens rather than blessings had been clearly demonstrated. In those final moments of the will reading, as Sandra struggled to maintain her dignity in the face of her own recorded cruelty, as Michael grappled with the cost of his choices, as Margaret wept both for her loss and for the justice that had finally been served, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had lived my life with dignity, faced my death with courage, and ensured that my legacy reflected my values rather than other people's greed. The woman who had been dismissed as better off dead had had the final word, and that word was a resounding affirmation of the value of every human life, especially those nearing its end. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to accept other people's diminished view of our worth, especially when those people are the ones we love most. My story became a reminder that families are not just about blood relationships, but about mutual respect, genuine care, and the recognition that every person deserves dignity regardless of their age or circumstances. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for our families is to show them the consequences of their choices, even if those consequences are painful to witness. In the end, I had chosen truth over comfort, justice over peace, and dignity over family harmony. And in making those difficult choices, I had finally become fully myself, not just someone's mother or burden or inconvenience, but Rose Williams, a woman who had lived with purpose and died with her integrity intact.